Hi and welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen and today we'll be discussing DeMar DeRozan and where he could end up landing during this year's free agency period. Stay tuned. First and foremost, before we begin, we got to do the Q&A segment, so let's get to the questions. Oh, okay. Well then, sure, I get it. It's probably one of those situations where one person says, I love you way too soon in the relationship. It makes it super awkward. So you know what? It's fine. Let's just simmer on our relationship for a couple months and then we'll return to the Q&A section. And let's just get to DeMar DeRozan instead. DeMar DeRozan has flown under the radar this year as he has most years, generally speaking. He's averaging 21.7 assists, 4 rebounds, and he is just steady as a rock when it comes to his offensive production and influence. Over the past 3 seasons, after becoming a San Antonio Spur, DeRozan has averaged 6.2 assists per game, really showcasing his dramatic improvement as a passer, playmaker, play initiator, and that is tremendously attractive to teams going into free agency because you always want someone who can play the wing, or in DeRozan's case, play a small ball power forward kind of role who can initiate the offense, dribble the basketball, get into the teeth of the defense and dish it off or score. There's tremendous offensive flexibility in what DeRozan can do because of his passing. Now, to be fair, DeRozan does still have some limitations. Even though he's going to be 32 this year, he has not improved his three-point shot much of all. He is shooting 26.9% from 3 on 1.4 attempts per game. Now, I will say this. I credit DeRozan for acknowledging that the three-pointer is not his bread and butter. He is sticking to the mid-range area. He is sticking to being a slasher and a driver. And you know what? That works. He is playing to his strengths. I gotta give him that. That said, not being able to adapt into this new age NBA where spacing is so fundamental and such a huge component of a successful NBA offense, that is hard to swallow considering just how much time he spends on the ball. Not being able to shoot means that you kind of have to tailor your offense around that. It's a liability. That said, his newfound passing element and the fact that he does play to his strengths does minimize that output. By that, I mean, while he may not be a high volume 3-point shooter and while he is a problem in terms of spacing, you won't really run into a lot of issues with him generally speaking. He is, like I outlined, a very fundamentally sound passer. He's a strong on-ball creator, so he will always have a certain high baseline that he'll be able to reach solely because of that established game. So if you are a general manager or a coach out there and you're looking at DeRozan and you're going, well, he can't shoot, so how would he fit into our offense? At least you'll know that he'll rack up assists, rack up drives, he'll get to the free throw line a ton. That's also another component of his. He's averaging 6.9 free throw attempts per game and hitting over 80% from the line, and that's been consistently so for at least a few years now. This guy just knows how to get to the line and score. So there is this baseline that you do need to take into account. But yes, it is crucial that you flank him with shooters. One of the reasons that I don't have the Miami Heat on the list of teams that I'll get to in a moment is simply because they, as a basketball team, don't really have a whole lot of shooters themselves. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, despite how good they are just not 3-point shooters. So adding DeRozan to that core, that would give the Heat 3 non-shooters in the starting lineup, and you know what? That you can't justify in today's NBA. That is just a complete non-starter from a spacing issue. So let's get to the teams where I think DeRozan could make some sense. We'll start up with the Dallas Mavericks. And before you crucify me, because I know what I've said repeatedly on this channel that I want Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis to get that third player in who fits their timeline, and DeRozan certainly does not fit that timeline. That said, in Dallas, you kind of need to just do something in terms of acquiring talent. The team is playing fairly well, I will give them that, but you need someone who can take over some ball handling responsibilities from Luka so you don't exhaust him with as much responsibility. You also want someone who can create their own shots from the perimeter at a consistent pace. DeRozan can do that. And it also means that Kristaps Porzingis can be a little bit more selective with his three-point shooting. Now, another component to this is also that Luka and Kristaps, they do tend at times to take shots that's really out of the flow of the offense. They're kind of wild shots. DeRozan could offer them a calming presence by being that more calculated third offensive option who can really take over ball handling duties when things go a little bit haywire. He can tell the guys, relax, you don't need to jack up step back threes or 35 footers if you're Kristaps. Just give me the rock. If we need some points, I'll get into the teeth of the defense, I'll get to the paint, I'll make some plays from there. Just be ready outside the three-point line for spot-ups. Now, the spot-up three-pointer is also one of those areas that I really want to see Dallas improve, especially with Luka Doncic, who right now is being asked to create most of his own three-point attempts. For him to be able to spot up and kind of feed off of others' attention, that's pretty crucial. He has to be able to be more than just an on-ball creator. For him to run around the three-point line when someone else has the ball and just receive those kickouts in order to shoot open shots, that has to become a staple in his offensive game planning, simply just to allow him to relax a little bit more on offense and not feel that burden of having to create virtually everything. DeRozan fixes that issue. DeRozan is a guy who will attract a lot of attention as soon as he's within 10 feet of the basket. That's in part why he plays a new age, small ball power forward role. It just works. Teams are very, very aware that when DeRozan gets into the defense, they have to work. They have to adjust, they have to rotate, they have to shut him down because he is very dangerous in that area. And if the defense collapses, maybe they cheat off of Luka, maybe they cheat off of Kristaps, which means DeRozan then can find them for spot-ups. There is an offensive marriage here that could work. Now, for DeRozan to work out financially, the team will have to basically renounce Tim Hardaway Jr., and they likely will have to also to move on from Josh Richardson. So it really comes down to this question: what do they want to do? Do they want to hang on to Josh and Tim, or do they want to go a little bit bigger with DeRozan and hope that he unlocks something more from the inner core of that team? It's a difficult question because Hardaway has been productive over the past 2 seasons, Richardson less so after being acquired last offseason, but he is still a guy who has two-way upside. There is something there, even though he's having a down year. So it really becomes one of those situations where you have to gauge, what do we want as a basketball team? Do we want to have a little bit more depth, or do we want to go in on this model with Luka, Kristaps, and then hopefully DeRozan that makes life easier on those two? It's fair if you don't choose DeRozan in this scenario and you just kind of go, we like what we have and we want to stick to it. I think that would be entirely reasonable. But it's also worth a discussion just saying, what could our offensive potential look like if you throw DeMar DeRozan into that equation? Now, defensively, it wouldn't be great. DeRozan's defense varies wildly. That's one of the things that's not consistent about him. The same can be said about Luka, the same can be said about Kristaps, although, to be fair, Kristaps over the past couple months has really amped up his defensive presence. That said, over the course of his career, he has been inconsistent as well. So this would be a team that heavily leans into offensive basketball just to be able to survive, which, I guess could work. But then in the playoffs, you do need to ask yourself, will we just get targeted by every competent team in the NBA, especially in the Western Conference? And the answer is undoubtedly yes. Yes, you would. And that's a problem. So the Dallas Mavericks need to figure out, how can we best optimize our own chances in the playoffs? If the answer is DeRozan, cool. If it's not, also cool. It's at the very least worth a discussion. Next up are the New York Knicks, and full disclosure, it would be super fun to see Julius Randle and DeMar DeRozan play together. although there might be some positional overlap there with DeRozan developing into a type of on-ball power forward. Julius Randle, as great as he is, can only play one position in the NBA, and that is the 4. He is not a center, he is not a small forward, he isn't a point guard, but working in his favor is the fact that he can also create off the bounce. Randle is a playmaker, much like DeRozan, which means they become somewhat interchangeable from an offensive perspective. Like defensively, it would be worrisome. A Randle, DeRozan, RJ Barrett trio from a defensive perspective is not great. Let's just be honest here. It would be somewhat of the same issues that would be going on in Dallas. Now, offensively, that team could be very, very potent, assuming, of course, DeRozan doesn't take the much needed ball handling possessions out of the hands of Barrett, who needs development minutes. He's only in his second year. He will be looking at to take that third-year leap. And if DeRozan is there, could that potentially prevent Barrett from reaching that ceiling? I think that's a fair question, because Barrett is also one of those guys who has the ball in his hands quite a lot of time. So for him to take the ball out of his hands and give that to DeRozan instead and play more of a spot-up shooting guard kind of role, I don't think that's his game. He needs to be someone who creates with the ball in his hands, even though the same principle applies with Barrett as it did Luka, just in terms of improving your spot-up capabilities. Barrett is just a little bit different. He's not a natural shooter like Luka in terms of body fluidity, ability to create the space, so you can't really look at it through the same lens entirely. And to be fair, Barrett is actually improving quite dramatically when he's on the ball. Do you want to stop that improvement by taking in someone who'll be 32 this year? It's a fair question. Now, there's no doubt that DeRozan does make them better. But the Knicks are also quite young. They have Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickley, Julius Randle is only 26. So you're looking at a team that's sort of trying to build for the future as well as being competitive now. Does it make sense to take on DeRozan, who's at the age that he is, expecting that this could be a long-term fit? I don't necessarily think so. But I do have to bring them up because Tom Thibodeau likes veterans. He likes to have productive players that he can play for a long period of time. DeRozan fits that bill, and the Knicks do have a lot of money to spend in free agency. I would be surprised if there is no article at any point suggesting a marriage between the two parties, but I also wouldn't be shocked to see if there isn't a mutual level of interest. For the Knicks, it's about looking for the future while also taking into account how do we best utilize the current in-prime production of Julius Randle. If the answer, much like in Dallas, isn't DeRozan, you know what? That's fair game. But like I said before, and this is going to be a concurrent theme, you at least need to have the discussion. Another team that is loaded just in terms of having financial flexibility this summer, that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. And in terms of the DeRozan fit, no dice whatsoever. It doesn't even make sense. Like, look, I'll be honest with you. Personally, I kind of think that fit would be superb. I think DeRozan would be a great veteran leader to put onto that team. I think he would be able to offset some of the offensive responsibilities from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I kind of like the fit, to be honest with you, but considering that they're not even playing Al Horford, that they're really going super young, it's just a complete non-starter. They are looking at the future. They're trying to get young guys in and build off of there. I just don't see any scenario in which they have interest in DeRozan. And honestly, I don't see a scenario wherein DeRozan has interest in the Oklahoma City Thunder, knowing full well that they're building for tomorrow instead of today. So I had to bring them up because of the monetary things, but no, I would be utter shocked if that came to fruition. Finally, we have to bring them up. And you can see that I'm already smiling because this would be just a fantastic story. The Toronto Raptors, a return to Canada. It's no secret that the Toronto Raptors fan base love DeMar DeRozan. And it's with good cause too. He was a fighter and a soldier for the Raptors for years. He may not have been a three-point shooter who brought them all the way to the championship as Kawhi Leonard did, but he was one of those hard-working guys who just carved out his own role in Toronto and is one of the best players in Raptors history. There's also a well-known connection with him and Kyle Lowry, who are great friends. Now, a return would be a little bit problematic because Kyle Lowry himself is also a free agent. His cap hold is worth $44 million as of right now, and that could make it difficult. Now, okay, so there is one pathway here, and that is his cap hold will actually get replaced by his actual salary. So if the Raptors and Kyle Lowry come together and the Raptors go, you know what? If you sign for a certain amount of money, we can be able to afford DeRozan. Maybe that's a big enough carrot for him to go, you know what? Let's jump on this wagon once again in Toronto. Let's get my boy back. Let's see what we can do from there. I want to be into it. Now, here's the thing though. DeRozan is, like I said, more of a forward. They already have OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam playing the forward spot. So what do you do in those instances? You also have Fred VanVleet at the guard. There isn't really a whole lot of movement. But the Raptors could go super small and start Siakam at center, play DeRozan at the 4, OG Anunoby at the 3, VanVleet and Kyle Lowry in whatever capacity at the guards. It's fine. That could be interesting. That would be a speedy team. There would still be a lot of defense on that roster. There would be a lot of spacing. It might actually be the best fit for DeMar DeRozan, which is kind of fun to say because it's the Raptors. It would also be a great story. But just in terms of pure basketball reasons, DeRozan would come into a team that fits his timeline, where there's a lot of spacing around him and where there's a lot of defense that can hide his inability to be a high impactful defender. On paper, the Toronto Raptors seems to be exactly the right spot for him, considering where he is at this stage of his career. I know which option of these that I'm rooting for. How about you? Sound off in the comments below.